Understanding Network Fundamentals for Security Professionals by Emmanuel Tuffet, founder of UWeb's Technology. A comprehensive guide to secure network. Architecture, protocol analysis, traffic inspection, and threat detection across modern enterprise. Environment. To God, whose grace and guidance sustain me in every step. 2. My beloved wife, Marie S. Tuffet, for your strength, love, and unwavering support. To my daughter, Malia, my joy and inspiration. This work is part of the legacy I build for you. May it reflect purpose, discipline, and faith, and inspire all who seek knowledge and protection in the digital world. Emmanuel Tuffet. Before a system is ever compromised, it is first misunderstood. Mastery of networks is not merely technical, it is the discipline of seeing what others overlook, securing what others assume, and protecting what others fail to understand. Foreword. In an era where digital systems underpin nearly every aspect of modern life, the importance of understanding networks cannot be overstated. From global enterprises to personal devices, the flow of data defines how we communicate, operate, and innovate, yet within that same flow lies vulnerability, an ever-present reality that demands not only awareness, but mastery. What sets this work apart is its deliberate focus on bridging the gap between networking fundamentals and real-world security application. Many resources treat these domains separately, leaving professionals with fragmented knowledge. This book challenges that approach by presenting networks not just as systems to be built, but as environments to be defended, analyzed, and understood at a deeper level. Emmanuel Tuffet brings a disciplined and purposeful perspective to this subject. His approach reflects both technical rigor and a clear understanding of the responsibility that comes with safeguarding digital infrastructures. Rather than overwhelming the reader with abstract theory, he guides them through structured learning, connecting foundational principles such as the OSI model, IP addressing and protocol behavior to practical security scenarios, threat detection, and enterprise-level defense strategies. The inclusion of case studies and hands-on labs further reinforces this philosophy. Security is not learned passively. It is developed through observation, analysis, and application. By walking through real-world situations, auditing subnet boundaries, identifying unauthorized access points, analyzing packet flows, this book ensures that the reader is not only informed but prepared. Beyond its technical depth, this work carries a broader message that cybersecurity is a discipline of vigilance, responsibility, and continuous growth. In a landscape where threats evolve rapidly, professionals must develop the ability to think critically, adapt quickly, and act decisively. This book serves as both a foundation and a guide for that journey. Whether you are an aspiring professional or an experienced practitioner seeking to strengthen your core understanding, you will find value in these pages. It is a resource that encourages not only learning but mastery, and in doing so, contributes to the development of stronger, more resilient defenders in the digital world. Foreword Contributor. Preface. In today's interconnected world, networks are no longer just technical infrastructures. They are the backbone of communication, commerce, governance, and daily life. Every packet transmitted, every request processed, and every connection established carries not only data but risk. As systems grow more complex, so do the threats that target them. For the modern security professional, understanding networks is no longer optional, it is foundational. This book was written to bridge the gap between theoretical networking knowledge and practical security application. Too often, Networking is taught in isolation, as a series of protocols and configurations detached from the realities of cyber. Threats, conversely, cybersecurity is sometimes approached without a deep understanding of how data actually moves across systems. This disconnect creates vulnerabilities not only in infrastructure but in mindset. My goal is to provide a structured, in-depth exploration of network fundamentals through the lens of security, from the OSI model to real-world packet analysis, from subnetting strategies to threat detection. Each chapter is designed to build not just knowledge but clarity. You will learn how networks function, how they fail, and how they are exploited, and most importantly, how they can be defended. This work is also rooted in experience, discipline, and Roman 12. Purpose. As someone who has walked through adversity and emerged with renewed vision, I approach cybersecurity not merely as a profession but as a responsibility. To protect systems is to protect people. To understand networks is to anticipate threats, and to master both is to stand as a guardian. In a digital age where security is constantly tested, whether you are preparing for a cybersecurity career, advancing your technical expertise, or strengthening your defensive capabilities, this book is designed to equip you with the mindset and tools required at an enterprise level. Approach it with focus, curiosity, and discipline, and it will serve you well. Emmanuel Tuffet. Roman 13. Acknowledgements. First and foremost, I give all honor and gratitude to God, whose wisdom, grace, and mercy have guided me through every stage of my journey. Your strength has sustained me, and your purpose continues to shape my path. I extend my deepest appreciation to my beloved wife, Marie S. Tuffet. Your unwavering support, strength, and elegance have been a constant source of encouragement. Through every challenge and every milestone, you have stood beside me with patience and love, and for that I am forever grateful. To my daughter Malia, you are my inspiration and my legacy. Your light, joy, and presence remind me daily of why I strive to build, to grow, and to leave something meaningful behind. Everything I do carries your future in mind. You would also like to acknowledge countless professionals, educators, and pioneers in the fields of networking and cybersecurity whose work has contributed to the knowledge shared in this book. Their dedication to advancing technology and security continues to inspire excellence. Finally, to every reader, learner, and aspiring cybersecurity professional, thank you for your commitment to growth and protection in an ever-evolving digital world. Your pursuit of knowledge strengthens not only your future, but the security of the systems we all depend on. Roman 14. Emmanuel Tuffet. Roman 16. Prologue. Before any system is breached, before any alert is triggered, there is a moment, quiet, unseen, where everything appears normal. Data flows, connections are established, and systems respond exactly as they were designed to. It is within this illusion of normalcy that the earliest signs of compromise often exist, hidden in plain sight. A single packet takes an unexpected path, a connection request lingers longer than it should, a port responds when it was never meant to be open. To the untrained eye, these are insignificant details. To a trained professional, they are signals, early indicators that something within the network is not as it should be. The reality of cybersecurity is that threats rarely announce themselves. They move deliberately, quietly, and strategically, exploiting not only technical weaknesses, but also gaps in understanding. An attacker does not need to break a system that is already misunderstood. They simply navigate it. This is where knowledge becomes defense. Understanding how networks function, how data is structured, how protocols behave, how systems communicate, is the foundation upon which all security is built. Without it, detection becomes guesswork. With it, patterns emerge, anomalies stand out, and control is regained. This book is not merely about learning networking concepts. It is about developing the ability to observe, to analyze, and to think beyond the surface. It is about training your mind to recognize the difference between expected behavior and subtle deviation, because in cybersecurity, the difference between secure and compromised is often defined by what others fail to notice. As you begin this journey, remember that every packet tells a story, every connection has intent, and every network, no matter how well designed, can be understood either by those who defend it or those who seek to exploit it. The choice of mastery begins here. Emmanuel Tuffet. Introduction. In the digital age, networks are the invisible infrastructure, powering everything from financial systems and healthcare platforms to communication, education, and global commerce. Every email sent, every website accessed, and every application deployed relies on the seamless movement of data across interconnected systems. Yet, within this constant exchange lies a critical truth. Where there is connectivity, there is vulnerability. Cybersecurity begins at the network level. Before an attacker exploits an application or compromises a system, they traverse the network. They analyze packet flows, identify open ports, exploit weak segmentation, and take advantage of misconfigurations. Without a deep understanding of how networks function, detecting and preventing these threats becomes significantly more difficult. This is why network fundamentals are not just a prerequisite, they are a core pillar of security expertise. This book is designed to provide a structured and practical understanding of networking through a security-focused lens. You will explore foundational models such as the OSI and TCP IP frameworks, gaining clarity on how data moves across layers and how security controls align with each stage. You will learn how IP addressing, subnetting, and routing define the boundaries of communication, and how these same mechanisms can be leveraged to enforce segmentation and reduce attack surfaces. As you progress, the focus shifts from structure to behavior. You will analyze how protocols operate in real environments, how TCP establishes reliable connections, how UDP enables speed at the cost of control, and how ports and service define access points into systems. The second steps are not presented in isolation. They are tied directly to security implications, helping you understand how attackers exploit them and how defenders can respond. The book also emphasizes real-world application. Through case studies and hands-on labs, you will step into the role of a security professional, auditing network designs, identifying vulnerabilities such as VLAN hopping or ARP spoofing, and analyzing traffic to detect anomalies. Tools like Wireshark become more than utilities. They become lenses through which you interpret and understand the behavior of networks at a granular level. Equally important is the mindset this book aims to develop. Cybersecurity is not only about tools and techniques, it is about thinking critically, questioning assumptions, and maintaining constant awareness. A secure network is not achieved through a single configuration, but through continuous monitoring, analysis, and improvement. Whether your goal is to enter the field of cybersecurity, strengthen your technical foundation, or advance toward enterprise-level expertise, this book is built to guide you. It is both a starting point and a deepening of knowledge resource that challenges you to not only understand networks, but to master them as a defender. The journey ahead requires discipline, curiosity, and calm. Introduction. Commitment, but with the right foundation, you will not only see how networks operate, you will see where they can fail, where they can be exploited, and how they can be secured. Emmanuel Tuffet. Core networking architectures and models. The OSI model, mapping security. Controls to layers. The Open Systems Interconnection, OSI model, is a theoretical framework that standardizes the functions of a telecommunication or computing system into 7 distinct abstraction layers. For a security professional, this model is not merely an academic exercise. It is the primary diagnostic tool for identifying where an attack occurs, which protocols are being exploited, and where to place specific defensive controls. The 7 layers of the OSI model. The Open Systems Interconnection, OSI, model provides a structured framework for understanding how data travels across a network, from the raw transmission of electrical signals to the applications users interact with daily. It divides communication into 7 distinct layers, each with a defined role, responsibility, and security implication. Rather than functioning in isolation, each layer depends on the one below it and supports the one above it. This layered approach allows security professionals to analyze, isolate, and defend specific points of vulnerability within the network stack. A weakness at any layer can be exploited, making it essential to understand not only what each layer does but how it can be secured. Layer 7, Application Layer. The application layer represents the point of interaction between the user and the network. It includes protocols such as HTTP, HTTPS, FTP, SMTP, and DNS. This is where applications request and receive network services. From a security perspective, this layer is highly targeted because it directly interfaces with user input. Common risks include injection attacks, cross-site scripting, XSS, and API. The OSI model, mapping security controls 2 layers. Abuse. Security controls focus on input validation, web application firewalls, WAFs, secure API gateways, and encryption through TLS SSL to protect data in transit and ensure trust between client and server. Layer 6, Presentation Layer. The presentation layer is responsible for formatting, encoding, and translating data so that it can be understood by the application layer. It also handles encryption and decryption, ensuring that sensitive information is protected during transmission. Security at this layer centers on cryptographic integrity, proper implementation of encryption protocols, certificate validation, and secure data serialization is critical. Weak encryption or improper handling of encoded data can expose systems to interception or manipulation. Layer 5, Session Layer. The session layer manages the establishment, maintenance, and termination of communication sessions between systems. It ensures that data exchanges remain synchronized and can recover from interruptions. From a security standpoint, this layer governs authentication sessions and state management. Vulnerabilities such as session hijacking or replay attacks often originate here. Controls include secure session tokens, timeout enforcement, and checkpointing mechanisms to maintain session integrity. Layer 4, Transport Layer. The transport layer ensures reliable or fast delivery of data through protocols like TCP, reliable, connection-oriented, and UDP, fast, connectionless. It is responsible for segmentation, flow control, and error handling. Security controls at this layer include firewall filtering, access control lists (ACL), and port-based restrictions. Since services are identified by port numbers, attackers often scan this layer to find open or vulnerable services. Proper configuration limits exposure and reduces the attack surface. Layer 3 Network Layer. The network layer handles logical addressing and routing, determining how data moves from source to destination. Across multiple networks, IP addressing and routing protocols operate at this level. Security here focuses on IP filtering, secure routing, virtual private networks (VPNs), and IPsec encryption. Misconfigured routing or lack of segmentation can allow unauthorized lateral movement within a network. Proper controls ensure that traffic follows secure and intended paths. Layer 2 Data Link Layer. The data link layer is responsible for node-to-node communication within the same network segment. It uses MAC addresses to identify devices and ensures error-free frame transmission. Security measures include MAC address filtering, switch, the OSI model, mapping security controls 2 layers, port security, VLAN segmentation, and IEEE 802.1x. Authentication, attacks such as ARP spoofing or VLAN hopping exploit weaknesses at this layer, making it critical to enforce strict access controls and validation mechanisms. Layer 1 Physical Layer. The physical layer represents the hardware components of the network: cables, switches, ports, and electrical signals. It is the foundation upon which all higher layers depend. Although often overlooked, physical security is essential. Controls include port locks, cable protection, surveillance, and environmental safeguards. Physical access to infrastructure can bypass all higher layer defenses, making this layer a critical point of protection. Security perspective, a layered defense strategy. The OSI model is more than a theoretical construct. It is a practical blueprint for layered security defense in depth. Each layer introduces potential vulnerabilities, but also opportunities for control and protection. By applying security measures across all 7 layers, organizations can reduce risk, detect anomalies more effectively, and build resilient network architectures. Understanding the OSI model allows security professionals to think systematically, troubleshoot efficiently, and defend proactively in an increasingly complex threat landscape. Mapping security controls to functional layers. Security professionals must map controls to specific layers to prevent security gaps, an effective defense in depth. Strategy ensures that if a control fails at one layer, another layer provides a secondary barrier. Layer 2 Data Link, the local perimeter. At this layer, data is framed and addressed via MAC addresses. Security here is focused on the local broadcast domain. Controls, port security limiting MAC addresses per port, 802.1x port-based authentication, and VLAN. Segmentation. Threat, a common risk is MAC flooding or ARP spoofing, where an attacker tricks a switch into sending traffic to the wrong physical port. Layer 3 Network, the routing perimeter. This layer manages logical addressing, IP, and routing. This is where you control traffic flow between different network segments. Controls, access control lists, ACLs on routers, ISEC, VPNs, and packet filtering firewalls. Threat, IP spoofing, forging the source IP, is a primary concern here, requiring reverse path forwarding (RPF) checks to verify traffic validity. The OSI model, mapping security controls 2 layers. Layer 4 Transport, the session perimeter. Layer 4 governs how data is transported via TCP or UDP. Security here focuses on managing the state of connections. Controls, stateful firewalls which track the state of sessions, port blocking and bandwidth throttling. Threat, SYN floods and port scanning attempts host resources or discover listening services by manipulating these transport flags. Layer 7 application, the payload perimeter. This is where the user interacts with the network, because this layer processes the actual data, HTTP, SMTP, FTP. It is the most common target for complex attacks. Controls, web application firewalls, WAFs, intrusion prevention systems, IPS, with deep packet inspection and content filtering. Threat, SQL injection, SQLI, and cross-site scripting. XSS operate here, hiding malicious commands inside. Legitimate-looking application requests. Data flow and encapsulation. Understanding the relationship between these layers requires looking at the encapsulation process as data moves down the stack. Each layer adds its own header and sometimes a trailer. The security control at each layer is essentially an inspection of these headers. In the sequence above, a firewall inspecting at layer 4 reads the transport header, TCP UDP ports, and IPS inspecting at layer 7 must de-encapsulate all the way down to the application data to inspect the content, the payload for malicious strings or patterns. Summary: the OSI model acts as a map for an enterprise network. By identifying which layer a threat originates from, you can determine exactly which security tool is best suited to block it. Moving forward, we will see how these layers interact with the more practical TCP/IP suite, where these theoretical divisions often overlap in real-world implementations. The TCP/IP protocol suite in modern environments. The TCP/IP suite is a modular 4-layer architecture that serves as the communication foundation for the modern Internet, unlike the rigid 7-layer OSI model, which is primarily a theoretical framework. For teaching and troubleshooting, TCP/IP is the practical implementation stack that software and hardware vendors build upon. Its design prioritizes interoperability between diverse operating systems and physical media. The architectural layers of TCP/IP. The suite organizes networking into 4 distinct functional levels. Each layer adds its own header information, a process called encapsulation, to the data as it moves down the stack toward the physical medium. 1. The application layer. This is where user-facing protocols reside. It does not just mean web browsers. It includes background services that handle data formatting and message exchange. Common protocols here include HTTP, DNS, SMTP, and SSH. From a security perspective, this is your primary attack surface. Vulnerabilities here, like buffer overflows in a web server or improper input sanitization, are the most common entry points for network-borne threats. 2. The transport layer. This layer handles the how of data delivery. It uses 2 primary protocols. TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, connection-oriented. It guarantees delivery through sequencing, acknowledgements, and flow control. Use this for traffic where data integrity is non-negotiable, such as file transfers, FTP, or email, SMTP. UDP, User Datagram Protocol, connectionless. It is fire and forget. It lacks error correction, making it faster but less reliable. Use this for real-time traffic like VoIP, DNS queries, and streaming media where speed outweighs the need for retransmitting dropped packets. the TCP/IP protocol suite in modern environments. 3. The Internet layer. The Internet layer is responsible for logical addressing and routing. Its primary protocol is IP Internet Protocol. Here, packets are addressed with source and destination IP addresses. Routers operate at this layer. They examine the destination IP address to determine the next hop in the path. This layer is where network segmentation occurs and where ACLs, access control lists, or packet filtering firewalls make decisions about whether to permit or drop traffic based on source-destination pairs. 4. The network access layer. This layer sits between the software stack and the physical hardware. It handles MAC addressing, hardware framing, and the actual physical transmission of bits, copper, fiber, or wireless. ARP, Address Resolution Protocol, lives here, mapping IP addresses to physical MAC addresses. Because this layer is broadcast heavy, it is susceptible to local network attacks like ARP spoofing. Application layer, HTTP DNS SSH. Transport layer, TCP UDP. Internet layer, IP ICMP. Network access layer, Ethernet Wi-Fi ARP. Physical medium, protocol encapsulation and security analysis. When a packet moves from a device, each layer encapsulates the layer above it. An HTTP request at the application layer is wrapped in a TCP segment at the transport layer, then an IP packet at the Internet layer, and finally an Ethernet frame at the network access layer. Security professionals analyze this stack to detect anomalies. For example, a TCP SYN flood attack targets the transport layer's handshake process, while an IP spoofing attack involves falsifying the Internet layer headers to bypass the TCP/IP protocol suite in modern environments. Source-based security rules. By understanding the header structure of each layer, you can identify when traffic deviates from established RFC standards, a telltale sign of malicious exploitation. Layered security mapping, functions, controls, and threats. To effectively defend a network, security professionals must understand how threats align with each layer of communication. The layered model below, closely aligned with the TCP/IP architecture, provides a practical view of where to apply controls and what types of attacks to expect. Each layer introduces unique responsibilities, and with them, specific security risks that must be addressed through targeted defenses. Application layer. At the application layer, data is interpreted and processed by services such as web servers, APIs, and email systems. This is where user input is received and where business logic is executed, making it one of the most exposed and frequently targeted layers. The primary security focus here is payload inspection and data validation. Every piece of incoming data must be treated as untrusted until verified. Security controls include input sanitization, web application firewalls, WAFs, API gateways, and secure coding practices. Common threats at this layer include SQL injection and cross-site scripting (XSS). These attacks exploit weak validation mechanisms, allowing attackers to inject malicious code, manipulate databases, or execute scripts in a user browser. Because this layer directly interacts with users, even small validation failures can lead to significant breaches. Transport layer. The transport layer governs how data is delivered between systems, managing connection states, reliability, and session integrity through protocols like TCP and UDP. It ensures that data arrives correctly and in sequence, or quickly, depending on the protocol used. Security at this layer focuses on session management and connection control, firewalls, rate limiting, and intrusion. Detection systems monitor traffic patterns and enforce rules based on ports and connection behavior. Typical threats include TCP, SYN flood attacks, and port scanning. A SYN flood overwhelms a system by initiating a large number of half-open connections, exhausting server resources. Port scanning, on the other hand, is often a reconnaissance technique used to identify open services that may be vulnerable to exploitation. The TCP/IP protocol suite in modern environments. Internet layer. The Internet layer is responsible for logical addressing and packet routing across networks. It determines how data travels from source to destination using IP addressing and routing mechanisms. Security controls at this level include packet filtering, path validation, and routing integrity checks. Firewalls and routers enforce policies that restrict unauthorized traffic and ensure that packets follow legitimate paths. Common threats include IP spoofing and ICMP tunneling. IP spoofing allows attackers to disguise their identity by falsifying source addresses, while ICMP tunneling can be used to covertly transmit data through networks by embedding it within seemingly legitimate control messages. Both techniques can bypass traditional defenses if not properly monitored. Network access layer. The network access layer handles communication within the local network segment. It governs how devices connect to the network and exchange data using hardware identifiers, such as MAC addresses. The primary security focus here is device authentication and port-level control. Mechanisms such as MAC address filtering, port security, VLAN segmentation, and IEEE 802.1x ensure that only authorized devices can access the network. Common threats include ARP poisoning and MAC flooding. ARP poisoning manipulates the mapping between IP and MAC addresses, allowing attackers to intercept or redirect traffic. MAC flooding overwhelms the switch memory, forcing it to broadcast traffic and potentially expose sensitive data to unauthorized devices. Security perspective, aligning threats with control points. This layered approach highlights a critical principle in cybersecurity. Threats are not random, they target specific weaknesses at specific layers. By understanding where attacks originate and how they operate, security professionals can deploy precise and effective defenses. Rather than relying on a single control, strong security is achieved through defense in depth, where each layer reinforces the others. When properly implemented, this strategy ensures that even if one layer is compromised, additional controls remain in place to detect, contain, and mitigate the threat. Mastering this mapping between layers, controls, and threats is essential for building resilient networks and responding effectively in real-world security scenarios. Summary: the TCP/IP suite is not merely a set of rules for communication. It is a layered security framework. Every security control, from a web application firewall at the application layer to port security at the network access layer, is designed to protect or inspect a specific layer of this stack. Mastering the flow of data through these 4 layers is the only way to effectively diagnose where a network failure or a security breach is occurring. Understanding encapsulation and data flow. Encapsulation is the process of wrapping data with the necessary protocol information at each layer of the networking stack. As data moves down the stack from an application to the physical medium, each layer adds its own header, a bundle of control information like source destination addresses, sequence numbers, and flags, to the data handed down from the layer above. When the data reaches the destination, the process reverses. Decapsulation. Each layer strips off its corresponding header and passes the remaining payload up to the next layer until the original application data is reconstructed. The mechanics of data construction. At the application layer, you have raw data, such as an HTTP GET request or an SMTP email message. As this data travels down, it is transformed into specific units called protocol data units PDUs. One transport layer segment/datagram. The data is broken into manageable pieces. Here the layer adds a header containing port numbers, e.g., source port 54321, destination port 80. If TCP is used, it also adds sequence numbers to ensure reassembly. To internet layer packet, the segment is placed into an IP packet. The header here is critical for security. It contains the source and destination IP addresses. This is the layer where routers make forwarding decisions. 3 data link layer frame. The packet is encapsulated into an Ethernet frame. This header includes the source and destination MAC addresses, crucially the data link. Layer also adds a trailer, the frame check sequence or FCS, which is used for error detection. Encapsulation and data flow across network layers. In network communication, data does not travel as a single, unchanged entity. Instead, it is progressively wrapped with additional information as it moves down the protocol stack. Understanding encapsulation and data flow. A process known as encapsulation. Each layer adds its own header and sometimes a trailer, providing the necessary control information required for data to be transmitted, routed, and delivered accurately. This transformation allows data to move seamlessly across complex networks while remaining interpretable state of the journey. Application layer right arrow raw data. At the highest level, the process begins with the application layer where user-generated data is created. This could be a web request, an email message, or an API call. At this stage, the data is simply data. There are no transport or routing instructions yet, only the content intended for transmission. Transport layer right arrow segment formation. As the data moves down to the transport layer, it is prepared for delivery between hosts. Protocols such as TCP or UDP add a header containing critical information like source and destination ports, sequence numbers, and session control. Data. The data now becomes TCP header plus data. This unit is referred to as a segment for TCP or a datagram for UDP. The added header ensures that the receiving system knows how to reconstruct and process the data correctly. Internet layer right arrow packet formation. Next, the segment moves to the internet layer where logical addressing is applied. The IP protocol adds a header containing source and destination IP addresses, along with routing information. The structure now becomes IP header plus TCP header plus data. At this stage, the unit is called a packet. This layer is responsible for determining how the data travels across networks, potentially passing through multiple routers before reaching its destination. Data link layer right arrow frame construction. As the packet reaches the data link layer, it is prepared for transmission across the local network segment. A frame, header, and trailer are added, including MAC addresses and error checking information such as a frame check sequence. FCS. The complete structure is now frame header plus IP header plus TCP header plus data plus frame trailer. This unit is known as a frame. It ensures that data can be delivered reliably between devices on the same physical network. Understanding encapsulation and data flow. Physical layer right arrow bit transmission. Finally, the frame is passed to the physical layer, where it is converted into a stream of bits, electrical signals, light pulses, or radio waves, depending on the transmission medium. At this level, the data is no longer structured as headers and payloads but as bits, zeros, and ones. These signals travel across cables, fiber optics, or wireless channels to reach the destination device. Decapsulation, revering the process. Once the data arrives at the destination, the process is reversed through decapsulation. Each layer removes its corresponding header and trailer, passing the remaining data upward until it reaches the application layer in its original form. Security perspective. Why encapsulation matters. Encapsulation is not just a functional process, it is a critical point of security visibility and control. Each layer introduces metadata that can be inspected, filtered, or manipulated. Transport headers reveal ports and session behavior. IP headers expose source, destination, and routing paths. Frame headers identify local devices and network access points. Attackers often exploit weaknesses within these layers, such as crafting malicious packets, spoofing headers, or injecting data. For defenders, understanding encapsulation enables precise traffic analysis, anomaly detection, and effective implementation of layered security controls. In cybersecurity, visibility into each layer is the difference between blindly transmitting data and intelligently defending it. Security implications of the encapsulation chain. From a security perspective, every header added during encapsulation represents a potential attack surface or a point of observation. Visibility and traffic analysis. Because headers are typically sent in cleartext, an attacker performing a man-in-the-middle (mid-M) attack can read the source, destination, IP addresses, port numbers, and sequence numbers. Even if the payload, the encrypted application data, is opaque, this allows for traffic shaping or DOS attacks against specific service ports. Protocol manipulation. Security vulnerabilities often stem from the way operating systems handle malformed packets. If an attacker crafts a packet where the length field in the IP header does not match the actual size of the encapsulated payload, they may trigger a buffer overflow or a crash in the receiving device's networking stack. Encapsulation/tunneling abuse. Protocols like GRE, VXLAN, or ISEC purposefully nest one set of encap. Understanding encapsulation and data flow. Sulated packets inside another. While used for legitimate VPNs, attackers exploit this to bypass traditional firewalls. The firewall inspects the outer header, sees it as permitted traffic, and misses the malicious traffic hidden within the inner, encapsulated payload. Decapsulation and trust boundaries. Decapsulation is the primary point where input validation must occur. When a network device receives a frame, it performs a series of integrity checks. 1. FCS check. The device calculates a checksum on the incoming frame. If the frame was corrupted in transit or tampered with, the FCS will not match and the frame is dropped immediately. 2. Protocol header inspection. The device checks the header fields. Does the IP address belong in this subnet? Is the TCP flag valid for the current connection state? 3. Handoff. If the checks pass, the header is stripped and the payload is pushed to the next layer. If a header contains an invalid field, such as an impossible flag combination, e.g., a Christmas tree packet with SYN, FIN and RST flags set simultaneously, the device should discard the segment before it ever reaches the application. This is the first line of defense in network security. Summary: encapsulation isn't just about moving data. It is a rigid, rule-based transformation that provides the context required to route, deliver, and verify information. By understanding how these layers wrap and reveal data, you can identify where to implement inspection points and how to recognize anomalies that suggest an attacker is attempting to subvert these structural norms. Case study: mapping an enterprise. Network topology. Network topology mapping is the practice of visualizing the physical and logical relationships between nodes. It is not merely a drawing exercise. It is an exercise in identifying trust boundaries, single points of failure, and potential lateral movement paths. To map network effectively, you must move beyond the cloud icon and define exactly what constitutes the boundary between internal and external communication. The hierarchical network architecture. Enterprise environments typically rely on a hierarchical model to manage complexity. The three-tier architecture separates network functions into layers, each serving a distinct purpose in both traffic flow and security policy. Enforcement. Core layer, the high-speed backbone responsible for fast transport. It should have minimal security processing, like deep packet inspection, to prevent latency. Its only job is to move bits as fast as possible between distribution blocks. Distribution layer, the policy boundary. This is where security occurs. Access control lists, ACLs, routing summaries, and inter-VLAN routing. If an attacker moves from a guest network to a server segment, they pass through this layer. Access layer, the connection point for end-user devices. This is where port security is enforced, such as limiting the number of MAC addresses allowed per switch port. Mapping logical data flow. Security professionals map networks by tracing traffic paths. Based on the OSI model, when you look at an enterprise diagram, you are looking for choke points, places where traffic is forced to pass through a device that can inspect it. If a diagram lacks clear choke points, the network is flat. In a flat network, there is no effective segmentation, meaning a compromised workstation in the accounting department can talk directly to a database in the server farm. Mapping. This involves identifying the default gateways and the routes taken between disparate subnets. Case study: mapping AN enterprise network topology. Network path and policy enforcement across layers. Modern enterprise networks are not flat environments, are structured, segmented, and controlled through multiple layers of infrastructure. Each segment in the data path plays a specific role in forwarding traffic, enforcing policy, and protecting resources. Understanding how data moves from a user workstation to the public internet and back is essential for both network design and security operations. The diagram represented here illustrates a typical flow across Layer 2 data link and Layer 3 network domains, highlighting where policy enforcement, routing, and translation mechanisms take place. User workstation right arrow access layer, Layer 2. The journey begins at the user workstation, where a request is generated, such as accessing a web application. This device connects to the network through an access switch, operating primarily at Layer 2. At this stage, communication is based on MAC addresses. and the switch is responsible for forwarding frames within. The local network segment, security controls at this level include port security, restricting device access, MAC address filtering, 802.1x authentication. This is the first line of defense, ensuring that only authorized devices can connect to the network. Access switch right arrow distribution layer/firewall, layer 2 right arrow. Layer 3 transition. Traffic is then forwarded from the access switch to the distribution layer, where layer 2 transitions into layer 3 routing. This is a critical control point in enterprise networks. Here, policy enforcement begins in a meaningful way. Firewalls and layer 3 switches inspect traffic based on IP addresses, ports and protocols, security rules and access control lists, ACLs. Case study, mapping AN enterprise network topology. This layer often acts as a segmentation boundary, separating user networks from sensitive zones such as server farms. It is also where inter-VLAN routing occurs, allowing controlled communication between different network segments. Firewall/distribution, layer right arrow server farm, internal routing and policy control. Within the internal network, traffic may be directed toward a server farm where applications, databases, and services are hosted. Routing decisions are made based on IP addressing, while firewalls enforce strict policies to control access. Security mechanisms at this stage include internal firewall rules, microsegmentation, east-west traffic inspection. This ensures that even inside the network, access is not unrestricted. Unauthorized lateral movement is a primary concern, and this layer is designed to contain it. Internal network right arrow edge router, NAT, and external routing. As traffic moves toward external destinations, it reaches the edge router, which serves as the gateway between the private network and the public internet. One of the most critical functions here is network address translation, NAT. Private IP addresses used Arabic lam, Arabic ket, Arabic alif, Arabic dal, the. Internal network are translated into a public IP address that can be recognized on the internet. At this boundary, key security controls include NAT masking internal structure, egress filtering, outbound traffic monitoring. This layer ensures that internal systems are not directly exposed while still allowing controlled external communication. Edge router right arrow public internet. Once translated and routed, the data exits the organization and enters the public internet. At this point, the traffic traverses multiple external networks before reaching its destination. Because the internet is an untrusted environment, encryption, such as TLS HTTPS, becomes essential to protect data in transit. Without it, data could be intercepted or altered. Return path and inbound security. When responses return from the internet, they follow the reverse path. Edge router verifies NAT mappings. Firewall enforces inbound policies. Distribution layer routes traffic internally. Access layer delivers data to the endpoint. Inbound traffic is typically more restricted, allowing only ease. Case study, mapping AN enterprise network topology. Established or explicitly permitted connections to pass through. Security perspective, layered control and visibility. This architecture demonstrates a fundamental principle of cybersecurity. Security is enforced at multiple points along the data path. No single device is responsible for protection. Instead, each layer contributes. Layer 2 controls who can connect. Layer 3 controls where traffic can go. Firewalls and NAT control how traffic is allowed and exposed. By distributing security controls across the network, organizations create a defense in-depth strategy. Even if one layer is bypassed, others remain in place to detect, restrict, or block malicious activity. Understanding this flow is critical for identifying misconfigurations, analyzing attack paths, and designing resilient network infrastructures in modern enterprise environments. Distinguishing physical versus logical topology. A physical map shows where cables run and where switches it. In the rack, a logical map shows how data actually traverses those components. Physical topology reveals physical hazards are two redundant routers plugged into the same power strip, are cables running through insecure ceilings. Logical topology reveals security hazards. Does traffic from the management VLAN leak into the EOT VLAN? Even if they are physically on the same switch, the logical topology defines the separation. Analyzing the trust boundary. When mapping, identify the untrusted, semi-trusted, and trusted zones. A standard enterprise edge uses a DMZ, demilitarized zone, to house public-facing servers. If you are mapping a network, you must verify that the traffic flow allows the internet to talk to the DMZ, but never directly to the internal core layer. If you find a path from the internet to the internal network that bypasses the DMZ, you have identified a critical architectural flaw. Evaluating path redundancy. A robust enterprise network must account for convergence. How quickly a network recovers when a device fails. If your topology map does not include secondary paths or heartbeat links, you are looking at a fragile environment. Insecurity. Terms lack of redundancy, availability, attacker soften, trigger denial of service dues, conditions on primary paths, to force traffic onto less secure, redundant paths that may lack the same level of packet inspection. Case study, mapping AN enterprise network topology. Summary. Mapping a network is a diagnostic process by identifying the three-tier structure, distinguishing between physical and logical paths, and validating trust boundaries. You identify where an attacker can hide and where your security controls will actually fire. Lab, visualizing packet flow with network diagramming tools. Network diagramming is the bridge between a logical understanding of protocols and the physical reality of an enterprise environment. Without the ability to visualize how traffic traverses hardware, security professionals are essentially blind to the attack surface they are tasked with defending. Mapping logical topology to physical infrastructure. A network diagram must distinguish between the physical layer, cables, switches, firewalls, and the logical layer, IP, subnets, VLANs, routing paths. When troubleshooting or performing security audits, you are typically concerned with the logical flow, how a packet moves from a source host through potential inspection points to a destination. Tools like Draw.io, Lucidchart, or Visio allow you to define these paths by creating a map of the data plane. A high-fidelity diagram for security analysis requires Lab, visualizing packet flow with network diagramming tools. 1. Define trust zones, clearly marking segments behind firewalls versus public-facing zones. 2. Path persistence, mapping the exact route packets take, including Layer 3 hops and Layer 2 broadcast domains. 3. Control points, highlighting where security controls, such as access control lists, ACLs, intrusion prevention systems, IPS, or deep packet inspection, DPI. Points are implemented. Visualizing packet encapsulation and forwarding. When a packet travels from a source to a destination across different network segments. It is subjected to constant encapsulation and re-encapsulation. As a security professional, you use diagrams to track the frame-to-packet-to-segment progression. In a standard Ethernet-based environment, each time a packet crosses a router, a layer 3 hop, the original Ethernet frame is stripped away, and a new one is built with updated source and destination MAC addresses, even though the source and destination IP addresses remain constant. If your diagram does not account for the router interfaces as distinct MAC address boundaries, you will misinterpret traffic captures later. Frame forwarding and re-encapsulation across network boundaries. When data travels from one host to another, especially across different networks, it does not remain in a single static form. Instead, it is forwarded, inspected, and re-encapsulated at each hop along the path. Understanding this process is essential for analyzing packet flow, troubleshooting connectivity, and identifying potential security risks. The sequence below illustrates how an Ethernet frame moves from a source host through a switch across a gateway, router, and finally to a destination server. Source host PC1, right arrow frame creation. The process begins at the source host PC1, where data is generated and prepared for transmission. After passing through the upper layers, the data is encapsulated at the data link layer into an Ethernet frame. At this point, the frame contains source MAC address, host A, destination MAC address, gateway/router interface, lab, visualizing packet flow with network diagramming tools, payload IP packet plus higher layer data. Even though the final destination is a remote server, the host does not send the frame directly to it. Instead, it forwards the frame to its default gateway because the destination exists on a different network. Layer 2 switch right arrow frame forwarding. The Ethernet frame is sent to a layer 2 switch, which operates purely at the data link layer. The switch examines the destination MAC address and uses its MAC address table to determine where to forward the frame. Key characteristics of this step: no modification is made to the frame. No inspection of IP addresses occurs. Forwarding is based entirely on MAC address lookup. The switch simply ensures that the frame reaches the correct next hop device, in this case the gateway router. Gateway R1, right arrow decapsulation and inspection. When the frame arrives at the gateway R1, a critical transition occurs. Unlike the switch the router operates at layer 3 network layer and must make routing decisions. The router performs the following actions. 1. Strips the Ethernet header and trailer. Removes the original MAC addresses, host A right arrow router. Interface. 1. Inspects the IP packet. Reads the destination IP address, e.g., IPZ. Determines the best path using its routing table. At this stage, the router is no longer concerned with the original layer 2 information. It focuses on layer 3 addressing to decide where the packet should go next. Re-encapsulation, right arrow new frame creation. After determining the next hop, the router prepares the packet for the next segment of the journey. This involves re-encapsulation at the data link layer. A new Ethernet frame is created with new source MAC address, router outgoing interface. MAC-C. New destination MAC address, next hop or destination device, MAC-D. Original IP packet preserved. This is a critical concept. Right arrow the IP packet remains the same end-to-end. Right arrow the Ethernet frame changes at every hop, hop-to-hop. Lab, visualizing packet flow with network diagramming tools. Forwarding to destination server. The newly encapsulated frame is then forwarded toward the destination server, either directly or through additional routers and switches. Each intermediate device repeats similar steps. Switches forward frames using MAC addresses. Routers strip and rebuild frames while routing based on IP. Eventually, the frame reaches the final network segment, where the destination server resides and the data is delivered. Security perspective, visibility and attack surface. This forwarding and re-encapsulation process introduces multiple points of visibility and potential exploitation. At Layer 2, attackers may attempt MAC spoofing or ARP poisoning. At Layer 3, threats such as IP spoofing or malicious routing can occur. At gateways, improper filtering can allow unauthorized traffic to pass. Because frames are rebuilt at each hop, security devices, like firewalls and IDS/IPS systems, can inspect, filter, and enforce policies at different stages of the journey. Understanding this process allows security professionals to trace packet paths across networks, identify anomalies in forwarding behavior, detect where manipulation or interception may occur. Key takeaway: data does not simply travel, it is handled, examined, and reconstructed at every stage. Mastery of this process provides the foundation for advanced network analysis, threat detection, and secure infrastructure design, creating effective network documentation for threat hunting. Effective diagrams for security purposes prioritize the data path over the physical cabling. While it is useful to know which port a server is plugged into, it is critical to know which security policies govern that port. To build an actionable diagram, represent choke points, draw every firewall or proxy as a distinct entity in the path. If your traffic must transit a transparent bridge, show it. If it hits an internal segment gateway, show it. Annotate IP/subnet boundaries. Label your subnets clearly. When traffic moves between subnets, acknowledge the router or Layer 3 switch that facilitates that movement. Lab, visualizing packet flow with network diagramming tools. Identify ingress and egress points. Mark the boundary between the internal network and the public internet. This helps visualize where perimeter defenses act as a shield. Exercises. 1. Logical mapping. Take an existing network setup or a hypothetical small office network and draw it. Place the internet, a perimeter firewall, an internal switch, and 3 endpoints, a server, a user workstation, and an IoT device. Connect them logically, ensuring the router firewall symbol sits between the external internet and the local subnets. 2. Path auditing. Trace the path of an HTTP packet originating from user workstation to web server and the internet. Draw the specific points where the source IP of the packet might change, e.g., at the NAT boundary of the firewall. 3. Constraint visualization. Modify your diagram to show where a static ACL might be placed to prevent the IoT device from reaching the server. Use a red dashed line to represent blocked path and a label to indicate the specific security control. Summary. Network diagramming is the act of formalizing your mental model of traffic flow by meticulously defining the path, the encapsulation changes, and the security checkpoints. You create a baseline for identifying anomalies. As we move into IP addressing and routing, you will apply these diagrams to verify that your subnetting boundaries match your security segmentation requirements. II. The infrastructure of IP. Addressing and routing. IP4 subnetting and CIDR notation. For security segmentation. An IP4 address is a 32-bit binary number, typically represented in dotted decimal notation for human readability, however, from a networking end. Security perspective, the address is only half the story. To define the scope of a network, we use a subnet mask, another 32-bit number that distinguishes the network ID, the neighborhood from the host ID, the specific house. The mechanics of subnetting. Subnetting is the process of borrowing bits from the host portion of an IP address to create smaller, isolated network segments. When you apply a subnet mask, you perform a bitwise AND operation between the IP address and the mask. Any bit that is 1 in the mask belongs to the network portion. Any bit that is 0 belongs to the host. Consider the network 192.168.1.0 with a subnet mask of 255.255.255.50. In binary, this mask is 24 ones followed by 8 zeros. We write this in CIDR classless interdomain routing notation as 24. IP 192.168.1.15. Mask 255.255.255.50. 24. Result network ID 192.168.1.0. If you change the mask to /25, 255, 255, 255, 128, you split the original network into two segments. The first network runs from 192.168.1.0 to 192.168.1.127. And the second runs from 192.168.1.128 to 192.168.1.255. IPv4, SUBNETTING and CIDR notation for security segmentation. IP address structure and forwarding logic. At the core of network communication lies the IP4 address, a 32-bit value that uniquely identifies devices and determines how data is routed across networks. This address is not random. It is logically divided into two essential components: the network portion and the host portion. Understanding this division is fundamental for routing decisions, segmentation, and secure network design. 32-bit IP address, the foundation. An IP4 address consists of 32 bits, typically represented in dotted decimal format, e.g., 192.168.1.10. These 32 bits are divided into a network portion. Right arrow identifies the network segment. A host portion. Right arrow identifies the specific device within that network. However, this division isn't fixed. It is defined by the subnet mask. Subnet mask applied, defining boundaries. The subnet mask determines which bits belong to the network and which belong to the host. For example, subnet mask 255.255.255.50, 24. First 24 bits right arrow network portion. Last 8 bits right arrow host portion. When the subnet mask is applied to an IP address using a bitwise AND operation, it produces the network identifier. Network identifier, determining location. The network identifier represents the address of the network itself. It answers the question, right arrow, which network does this device belong to? Devices sharing the same network identifier are considered to be on the same local network subnet and can communicate directly at layer 2. Unique device identifier, identifying the host. The remaining bits, the host portion, uniquely identify a device within that network. No two devices within the same subnet can share the same host identifier. This portion answers right arrow, which specific device on the network is the destination. Routing decision, Local versus remote communication. Once the network and host portions are defined, a critical decision is made. If the destination IP is within the same network identifier, write the data is delivered directly using Layer 2, MAC-based communication. If the destination IP is on a different network, write the data is forwarded to the default gateway router. IPv4, subnetting and CIDR notation for security segmentation. For routing, this decision is fundamental to how networks scale and communicate beyond local boundaries. Layer 2 delivery, final transmission. For local communication, once the destination is determined to be within the same subnet, the sender performs ARP address resolution protocol to map IP right arrow MAC address encapsulation into an Ethernet frame. Direct delivery to the destination device via switching. If the destination is remote, Layer 2 delivery is used only to reach the gateway, after which routing takes over. Security perspective, why this matters. Understanding IP structure and subnetting is critical for security because it directly impacts network segmentation, limiting lateral movement. Access control policies based on IP ranges. Detection of anomalies, unexpected traffic across subnets. Attackers often exploit poorly designed subnet structures to move laterally across networks. Proper segmentation and clear network boundaries reduce this risk significantly. Key takeaway: every packet's journey begins with a simple question. Right arrow, is the destination local or remote? The answer is determined by the relationship between the IP address and subnet mask. Mastering this concept allows you to understand routing behavior, enforce segmentation, and design more secure and efficient networks. CIDR notation for security segmentation. CIDR notation provides a concise way to define the boundaries of your security zones. Security professionals use these boundaries to enforce access control lists, ACLs, and firewall rules. When you define a security policy, you are not just blocking an IP, you are blocking a CIDR block. Security implications of bit boundaries. When designing segments, boundary placement dictates the size of your blast radius. A /24 subnet contains 254 usable hosts. If a single host is compromised within that segment, an attacker has a clear path for lateral movement to 253 other machines on the same broadcast domain. By using variable length subnet masking, VLSM, you can shrink the segment to fit the actual requirement. For instance, a dedicated server cluster requiring only 4 IPs should reside in a 30 network rather than a 24. This significantly limits the potential scope of an internal reconnaissance scan. IPv4, subnetting and CIDR notation for security segmentation. CIDR subnetting and practical network design. Classless interdomain routing, CIDR, is a foundational concept in modern networking that enables flexible and efficient address allocation. Instead of Frellinger rigid class-based addressing, CIDR allows network designers to define subnet sizes using a prefix length, e.g., 2427, which directly determines the number of available IP addresses and usable hosts within a network. Understanding how CIDR maps to subnet masks, total IP capacity, and real-world use cases is essential for both network segmentation and security architecture. CIDR prefix and subnet mask relationship. A CIDR prefix indicates how many bits are allocated to the network portion of the IP address. The remaining bits are used for host addressing. A larger prefix e.g. means for your hospit's right arrow smaller. Subnet. A smaller prefix e.g. means more hospit's right arrow larger. Subnet. The subnet mask is simply the dotted decimal representation of this division. Common CIDR ranges and their applications. /24 Standard Network Segment. Subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Total IPs 256. Usable hosts 254. This is one of the most commonly used subnet sizes in enterprise environments. It provides a balanced number of hosts while maintaining manageable broadcast domains. Use case: standard Office VLANs, user networks, and general-purpose segments where moderate scalability is required. 27. Small controlled segments. Subnet mask 255.255.255.224. Total IPs 32. Usable hosts 30. This subnet size is ideal for environments that require tighter control and limited device counts. Use case: small service clusters, application tiers, or segmented zones where only a specific group of systems should communicate. IPv4, SUBNTTING, and CIDR notation for security segmentation. Minimal allocation for specialized links. Subnet mask 255.255.255. 248. Total IPs 8. Usable host 6. This range is used when only a handful of IP addresses are needed. Use case: point-to-point links, small infrastructure segments, or management networks where efficiency and minimal exposure are priorities. 30. Highly restricted point-to-point networks. Subnet mask 255.255.255.252. Total IPs 4. Usable hosts 2. This is the smallest commonly used subnet for IP4, designed specifically for direct communication between two devices. Use case: router-to-router links, WAN connections, and scenarios where only two endpoints are required. Security perspective: subnetting as a control mechanism. CIDR is not just about efficient IP allocation, it is a powerful security tool. Proper subnetting allows organizations to segment networks to reduce attack surfaces, limit broadcast domains, and contain potential threats. Enforce access control policies between subnets. Prevent lateral movement by isolating critical systems. For example, placing sensitive servers in smaller subnets, e.g. 27 or 29, reduces exposure and makes monitoring more precise. Larger subnets, while convenient, can increase risk if not properly controlled. Key takeaway: CIDR enables precision in network design. By selecting the appropriate subnet size, you are not only allocating IP addresses, you are defining boundaries, controlling access, and shaping the security posture of the network. The ability to choose the right subnet for the right purpose is a fundamental skill for any cybersecurity professional. Calculating boundary anomalies. A common security mistake is miscalculating the network boundary, leading to leaky subnets where unintended devices can communicate without passing through a gateway or firewall. To identify these, always calculate the broadcast address, the last address in any subnet. For a network 10.0.0.0.28. 1 mask 28 means 28 bits are used for the network, leaving 4 bits for hosts. 2 host range 24 equals 1624 equals 16 total addresses. 3 network ID 10.0.0.0. IPv4, SUBNTTING, and CIDR notation for security segmentation. 4 broadcast, 10.00.15. 5 usable, 10.0.0.1 through 10.0.0.14. If you inadvertently assign 10.0.0.16 to a machine, it will be logically outside the security controls applied to the 10.0.0.0.28 segment, effectively bypassing your intended segmentation policy. Exercises. 1. Determine the network ID and broadcast address for a host with IP 172.16.5.100 and a mask of 26. 2. You are hardening a database server, if you need to. Isolate it from a web server subnet of 192.168.10.0.24. What is the smallest CIDR block you can use to give the database its own network? 3. Calculate how many usable IP addresses are lost to overhead network ID and broadcast in a 27 network compared to a 24 network. 4. Using an IP calculator or manual bit calculation, identify if 10.5.5.33.27 and 10.5.5.65.27 share the same network. Segment. Summary. Subnetting is der Chiral foundation of network security. By manipulating the CIDR prefix, you define the reachability of devices and the limitations of lateral movement. Accurate calculation of these boundaries ensures that security controls are applied consistently across the desired traffic flows. Next, we will explore how routers use these defined boundaries to move packets between segments. Routing protocols, static versus dynamic operations. A static route is a manually configured path that tells a router exactly where to send traffic for a specific destination network because the entry is hard-coded. In the router's configuration file, it is immutable unless an administrator physically modifies it. If the link associated with that static route goes down, the router will continue attempting to push traffic into that black hole until the configuration is changed or the interface is manually shut down. Static routes are preferred in stub networks environments where there is only one exit point, or for small, stable topologies where complexity is unnecessary. From a security perspective, static routes provide a deterministic traffic path. They cannot be compromised by route poisoning attacks or hijacked by a rogue router broadcasting malicious routing. Updates. The mechanics of dynamic routing. Dynamic routing relies on protocols like OSPF, Open Shortest Path First, EIGRP, Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol, or BGP, Border Gateway Protocol to build routing tables automatically. Routers running these protocols communicate with neighbors, sharing information about their local networks and the health of their connections. When a link fails or a new network is added, the protocol triggers a convergence process. Routers recalculate the topology, update their routing tables, and distribute the changes to their peers. This adaptability makes dynamic routing the only viable choice for enterprise and ISP networks, where manual management of thousands of routes would be operationally impossible. RUTING PROTOCOLS. Static versus dynamic operations. Static routing versus dynamic routing, path selection and discovery. Routing determines how packets travel from a source network to a destination subnet. There are two fundamental approaches to building these paths: static routing, manual path definition, and dynamic routing, automatic path discovery. Understanding both models is essential for designing resilient, secure networks and for interpreting how traffic actually flows between routers such as router A and router B. Static routing right arrow manual path definition. In a static routing model, The network administrator manually defines the path that traffic must take to reach a destination subnet. Routes are explicitly configured on each router. No automatic updates or learning occur. The path remains fixed unless manually changed. Example flow. Router A is configured with a static route pointing to Router B. Router B has a corresponding route toward the destination subnet. Traffic follows this predefined path without deviation. Security and operational perspective. White predictable and tightly controlled. White reduced attack surface, no route advertisements. Cross not scalable in large or changing environments. Cross no automatic failover if a link goes down. Static routing is commonly used in small networks, edge configurations, or highly controlled environments where stability and predictability are more important than flexibility. Dynamic routing, right arrow automatic path discovery. Dynamic routing protocols allow routers to discover and maintain routes automatically. Instead of manually defining every path, routers communicate with each other to exchange routing information. This process relies heavily on hello packets. Hello packets, right arrow neighbor discovery and health checks. Dynamic routing protocols, such as OSPF, EIGRP, or BGP, use hello packets to discover neighboring routers, establish and maintain adjacency, verify that connections are still active. How it works. Router A sends hello packets to Router B. Router B responds, forming a neighbor relationship. Routing information is exchanged dynamically. RUTING PROTOCOLS, static versus dynamic operations. Paths to the destination subnet are calculated automatically. If hello packets stop being received, the router assumes the neighbor is down and recalculates routes, enabling failover. Dynamic routing behavior. Once adjacency is established, routers share knowledge of available networks. The best path is selected based on metrics, cost, hop count, bandwidth, etc. Traffic is automatically rerouted if network conditions change. Security and operational perspective. White highly scalable for large networks. White automatic failover and adaptability. Cross more complex to configure and manage. Cross potential exposure to routing attacks, e.g. route injection, spoofed updates. Router A right arrow, Router B right arrow destination subnet. In both static and dynamic scenarios, the goal remains the same. Right arrow deliver traffic from the source router to the destination subnet. In static routing, the path is predefined Router A right arrow, Router B right arrow destination. In dynamic routing, the path is discovered and maintained through protocol communication. Security perspective, control versus adaptability. The choice between static and dynamic routing reflects a balance between control static routing, fixed, predictable, minimal exposure, adaptability dynamic routing, flexible, self-healing, scalable. In enterprise environments, both are often used together. Static routes for critical or edge paths. Dynamic routing for core and scalable infrastructures. Key takeaway. Routing isn't just about moving packets, it is about deciding the most efficient, reliable, and secure path through the network, whether manually defined or dynamically discovered. Every route represents a potential control point or vulnerability. Mastering both approaches allows security professionals to understand how traffic flows, how paths can be manipulated, and how to design networks that are both resilient and secure. RUTING PROTOCOLS, static versus dynamic operations. Comparing operational trade-offs, static vs dynamic. Routing. choosing between static routing and dynamic routing is not merely a configuration decision, it is a strategic trade-off that impacts scalability, resilience, performance, and security. Each approach offers distinct advantages and limitations, and understanding these differences is essential for designing efficient and secure network infrastructures. Scalability. Static routing. Static routing offers simplicity but does not scale well. Every route must be manually configured and maintained, which becomes increasingly complex as the network grows. In large environments, this leads to operational overhead and a higher risk of misconfiguration. Dynamic routing. Dynamic routing is designed for scalability. Routing protocols automatically discover, distribute, and update routes across the network. This allows organizations to manage large, complex infrastructures with minimal manual intervention, making it the preferred choice for enterprise and service provider environments. Fault tolerance. Static routing. Static routes do not adapt to network changes. If a link fails, traffic is disrupted until an administrator manually updates the configuration. This lack of responsiveness makes static routing unsuitable for environments requiring high availability. Dynamic routing. Dynamic routing protocols continuously monitor network conditions. When a failure occurs, routers automatically recalculate paths and reroute traffic, ensuring continuity of service. This self-healing capability is critical for mission-critical systems. Resource usage. Static routing. One of the key advantages of static routing is its zero protocol overhead. No additional CPU processing or bandwidth is consumed for route advertisements or updates, making it efficient for small or resource-constrained environments. Dynamic routing. Dynamic routing requires CPU and bandwidth resources to maintain routing tables and exchange updates. Protocols use mechanisms like hello packets and periodic updates, which introduce overhead. However, this cost is generally routing protocols, static versus dynamic operations, justified by the benefits of automation and resilience. Security surface. Static routing. Because static routing does not rely on routing protocols, it has a minimal attack surface. There are no route advertisements to intercept or manipulate, reducing the risk of routing-based attacks. Dynamic routing. Dynamic routing introduces a broader security surface. Without proper safeguards, attackers may attempt to inject false routes or disrupt routing updates. To mitigate this, protocols must be secured using authentication mechanisms, route filtering, and policy controls. Strategic perspective. When to use each. In real-world environments, the choice is rarely absolute. Static routing is ideal for small, stable networks, edge configurations, backup or fallback routes. Dynamic routing is essential for large-scale enterprise networks, environments requiring high availability, complex topologies with frequent changes. Most modern networks implement a hybrid approach, leveraging the strengths of both methods. Key takeaway. Static routing provides control and simplicity, while dynamic routing delivers scalability and resilience. The optimal design depends on the network size, complexity, and security requirements. A skilled cybersecurity professional must understand not only how each method works, but also when and where to apply them to achieve a balanced, secure, and efficient network architecture. Security considerations in protocol selection. The decision to use dynamic routing introduces a critical attack vector, the trust relationship between routers. If a Dynamic routing protocol is not properly secured. An attacker can connect a device to an access switch, enable a routing process, and announce themselves as the preferred path to sensitive subnets. This is a common precursor to man-in-the-middle (MIT-M) attacks. To defend against this, modern infrastructure requires 1. Neighbor authentication. Protocols like OSPF and BGP support MD5 or SHA authentication for routing updates without a matching cryptographic key. A rogue router cannot participate in the topology. 2. Passive interfaces on segments where no other routers exist, such as end-user access ports. The interface should be configured as passive. This prevents the router from sending or listening for routing updates on that port, effectively silencing the protocol where it is. ROUTING PROTOCOLS. Static versus dynamic operations. Needed. 3. Route filtering prefix lists. Even with dynamic protocols, administrators should strictly define which prefixes are permitted to be learned or advertised to prevent unauthorized topology changes. Exercises. 1. Topology analysis. Given a network with 2 core routers and 1 satellite office, identify the criteria that would dictate choosing static over dynamic routing. 2. Simulation. Using a network simulator or packet tracer, configure a static route on a Cisco iOS device and verify the entry using show IP route. Disrupt the path and observe the status of the route in the routing table. 3. Security audit. List the steps required to secure an OSPF adjacency using HMAC/SHA authentication. Summary. Static routing provides control and simplicity, but lacks the agility required for modern, resilient networks. Dynamic routing enables automatic recovery and scale, but introduces complex security requirements, specifically the need for neighbor authentication and traffic filtering. In a production environment, you will often find a hybrid approach. Dynamic protocols manage the internal core, while static routes handle point-to-point connections to external services or ISP handoffs. DHCP and DNS, critical services for network discovery. Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol (DHCP) and Domain Name System (DNS) are the mechanisms that translate high-level network intent into low-level connectivity. Without them, network access would be a manual, error-prone exercise in static configuration. The mechanics of DHCP, automated address assignment. DHCP is an application layer protocol that automates the distribution of IP addresses and network parameters, such as subnet masks, default gateways, and DNS servers. Instead of manually configuring every device, a client broadcasts a request to locate a DHCP server, which then assigns a lease for a specific duration. The exchange follows the DORA process. 1. Discover. The client broadcasts a DHCP DISCOVR, DHCP, and DNS, critical SCRVICES for network discovery. Message to identify available servers. 2. Offer. Available DHCP servers respond with a DHCP OFFER containing an IP address and configuration. 3. Request. The client broadcasts a DHCP request to formally accept a specific offer. 4. Acknowledgement. The server sends a DHCP ACK to confirm the lease and finalize the assignment. The DHCP process. Dynamic IP assignment in 4 steps. The Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, DHCP, automates the assignment of IP addresses and essential network configuration parameters to devices instead of manually configuring each host. DHCP enables a client to request and receive settings such as an IP address, subnet mask default, gateway, and DNS servers from a centralized server. This exchange follows a structured four-step process, often referred to as the DORA sequence: discover, offer, request, and acknowledge. Step 1. DHCP DICOVER broadcast. When a client first connects to the network, it does not yet have an IP address. To locate a DHCP server, it sends a DHCP DICOVER message as a broadcast. Source IP 0000, client has no address yet. Destination IP 255.255.255.255, broadcast to all devices. This message essentially asks, right arrow, is there any DHCP server available to assign me an IP address? Because it is broadcast, all DHCP servers within the local network segment can receive and respond. Step 2. DHCP OFFER, unicast or broadcast. Upon receiving the discovery message, a DHCP server responds with a DHCP OFFER. This message includes proposed IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, lease duration, DNS server information. The offer can be sent as unicast directly to the client if possible, or broadcast if the client cannot yet receive unicast traffic reliably. DHCP and DNS, critical SCRVICES for network discovery. This step represents the server's proposal. Right arrow, I can assign you this IP configuration. Step 3. DHCP REQUST broadcast. After receiving one or more offers, the client selects one and sends a DHCP REQUST message to confirm its choice. This message is broadcast to ensure the selected server knows its offer was accepted. Other servers withdraw their offers. The client is effectively stating, right arrow, I accept this IP address from this specific server. Step 4. DHCP ACK, unicast or broadcast. Finally, the chosen DHCP server responds with a DHCP ACK acknowledgement confirming the lease. This message finalizes the configuration and provides confirmation of the assigned IP address, valid lease duration, additional network parameters. At this point, the client can fully participate in network communication. Client left right arrow server interaction summary. The full exchange can be summarized as client right arrow DHCP DICOVER broadcast, server right arrow DHCP OFFER unicast broadcast, client right arrow DHCP REQUST broadcast, server right arrow DHCP ACK unicast broadcast. This structured negotiation ensures that IP addresses are assigned efficiently and without conflict. Security perspective, risks and protections. While DHCP simplifies network management, it also introduces potential risks. Rogue DHCP servers can issue malicious configurations. DHCP starvation attacks can exhaust available IP addresses. Man-in-the-middle, MITM, attacks can redirect traffic via false gateway settings. To mitigate these risks, organizations implement controls such as DHCP snooping, validating trusted servers, port security on switches, IP source guard, and dynamic ARP inspection. DHCP and DNS, critical SCRVICES for network discovery. Key takeaway: the DHCP process is more than a convenience, it is a critical service that defines how devices join and interact. Within a network, understanding each step of the DORA sequence allows security professionals to monitor behavior, detect anomalies, and secure the entry point of network Connectivity. Security note: DHCP is inherently insecure because it assumes a trusted local network. An attacker can deploy a rogue DHCP server to respond, to discover messages faster than the legitimate server, allowing the attacker to provide malicious default gateways or DNS servers, effectively facilitating man-in-the-middle (MIT-M) attacks. DNS, mapping human-readable names to numeric infrastructure. DNS translates fully qualified domain names, FQDNs, like www.enterprise.com into IP addresses. It functions as a hierarchical distributed database. When a client performs a lookup, it does not necessarily query the authoritative server immediately. It traverses a resolution path. One recursive resolver. The client is its configured DNS server, usually provided by DHCP. 2 root servers. If the local resolver lacks the answer, it queries a root server, which directs it to the appropriate top-level domain (TLD) server, e.g. com.org. 3 TLD servers. The TLD server provides the address of the authoritative name server for that specific domain. 4 authoritative server. This server contains the actual resource records CNAME-MX for the requested domain. DNS record types for security auditing. As a security professional, you must understand the records that define how a network and its services are reached. A record maps a domain name to an IPv4 address. A record maps a domain name to an IPv6 address. CNAME canonical name, an alias that points one domain name to another. MX mail exchange defines the mail servers for the domain. TXT, often used for domain verification and security. Policies like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Security note: DNS poisoning or spoofing occurs when an attacker injects fraudulent entries into a DNS cache, redirecting traffic to malicious servers. Furthermore, because standard DNS queries are sent in clear text via UDP, threat trivial to intercept and observe, leaking information about the internal assets an organization is attempting to reach. DHCP and DNS, critical SCRVICES for network discovery. Summary: DHCP provides the where by automating IP configuration, and DNS provides the what by translating names into routable addresses. These services are foundational for network discovery. However, their reliance on broadcast protocols and cleartext transmission makes them primary targets for redirection and reconnaissance attacks. Securing these services often involves implementing DHCP snooping to prevent rogue servers and moving toward encrypted DNS protocols such as DoH or DoT to maintain privacy and integrity. Case study: auditing subnet boundaries for security zones. Subnetting is not merely a method for organizing IP addresses, it is the primary mechanism for defining the blast radius of a security incident. When auditing subnet boundaries, the goal is to verify that the logical segmentation of the network matches the risk profile of the assets residing within those segments. If a web server in a DMZ and a database server containing PII, personally identifiable information, share the same subnet, a single compromised entry point grants an attacker lateral movement capabilities without crossing a security boundary. An effective audit identifies whether these boundaries are enforced by consistent addressing schemes and with their access control mechanisms actually respect those logical borders. Case study: auditing SUBNETBOUNDRIS for security zones. Defining security zones via CIDR boundaries. A security zone is a network segment with a unified policy. 2. Maintain this, subnets must be sized and addressed to avoid leaking across policy boundaries. Consider an organization that uses a 16 block for its entire internal infrastructure. If they assign subnets haphazardly, placing guest Wi-Fi in production servers in adjacent address ranges, it becomes trivial for an attacker to spoof traffic or bypass simple ACLs. Access control lists that rely on contiguous IP ranges. Auditing involves verifying that the CIDR mask is tight enough to encapsulate only the assets requiring that specific security policy. If you have 30 servers, a /24 256 addresses is often too large, leaving 226 unused addresses that could be leveraged by an attacker to introduce rogue devices or shadow infrastructure. Practical auditing, the principle of least privilege in addressing. When auditing, you must look for subnet bloat and zone intermixing. Subnet bloat occurs when an administrator allocates a large subnet to a small number of hosts. Security implication, increased attack surface for internal scanning. If an attacker gains a foothold, they have a larger pool of potential targets to probe within the same broadcast domain. Zone intermixing occurs when devices with different trust levels, e.g., IoT devices and employee workstations, reside on the same subnet. Case study: auditing subnetBoundris for security zones. Security implication: the network is effectively flat from a layer 2 perspective, even if you place a firewall between them. If they share a default gateway or L2 segment, ARP-based attacks or broadcast domain sniffing can bypass the firewall entirely. Case study: identifying insecure boundaries. Consider an enterprise network. One zone, a public-facing 192.168.10.26.64 addresses, contains 12 web servers. 2. Zone B, internal app 192.168.164.26.64 addresses, contains 40 internal services. 3. Zone C, management 192.168.112.825.128 addresses, contains 5 management jump boxes. An audit reveals that zone on bare contiguous, an attacker gaining control of a web server can easily guess the adjacent IP scheme by applying a more granular structure and ensuring that Zone C is routed through a strictly controlled stateful firewall where no traffic is permitted directly from Zone A to Zone C. You enforce the policy at the infrastructure level. Validating routing as a security boundary. Routing protocols are the enforcement agents of your subnetting strategy. If your subnets are defined but your routing table allows all traffic to flow freely between them, your subnets are merely logical labels rather than security boundaries. During an audit, compare your routing tables against your topology documentation. Look for default routes. Ensure they point only to a hardened gateway, never directly to an internal segment. Static routes. Look for shortcuts where traffic bypasses the firewall to optimize performance. These are frequent points of failure in security architecture. Interface ACLs. Ensure that every boundary defined by a subnet has an associated inbound-outbound filter on the router interface to verify the traffic matches the zone's intent. Summary: auditing subnet boundaries is the process of ensuring that the physical and logical layout of the network reinforces, rather than contradicts, your security policy by minimizing address ranges to fit actual asset counts and enforcing traffic flow. Through controlled chokepoints, You convert the network from a flat, high-risk environment into a series of compartmentalized zones. This preparation is essential for managing the transport and session layer controls that follow. Lab configuring static routes and subnetting exercises. A static route is a manually configured path in a router's forwarding table, unlike dynamic protocols that exchange topology data automatically. Static routes define an explicit next hop for specific destination. Networks in enterprise security, static routes provide deterministic traffic control, ensuring that sensitive traffic travels only through verified gateway or inspection points. The mechanics of static routing. A routing table consists of destination networks, masks, and next hop addresses, the IP address of the adjacent router, responsible for reaching that destination. When a router receives a packet, it compares the destination IP against its routing table. If a static route exists, the packet is forwarded to the specified next hop interface. To configure a static route, you must identify three components. 1. Destination network, the network you want to reach, e.g. 1051.0.24. 2. Subnet mask, the specific range of that network, e.g. 255.255.255.0. 3. Next hop exit interface, the interface or IP that bridges the gap to that network. Security implications of route selection. Static routes prevent unauthorized traffic redirection. If you dynamically learn routes, an attacker performing route injection, e.g., via OSPF or BGP spoofing, can redirect traffic through a rogue node. Static routes ignore these updates, effectively pinning the traffic path regardless of network. Advertising. Lab, CONFIGURNG static ROUTES and SUBNETTING exercises. Packet forwarding decision process in a router. Every time a packet reaches a router, a critical decision must be made. Right arrow, where should this packet go next? This decision is governed by the router's routing table, which acts as a map of known networks and the best paths to reach them. The process is systematic, fast, and repeated for every packet that traverses the network. Step 1. Packet arrives at router. A packet enters the router through an interface. At this stage, the Layer 2 header is removed, decapsulation. The router examines the Layer 3 IP header. The destination IP address becomes the key factor. The router does not care about the original MAC addresses anymore. It focuses entirely on logical addressing, IP. Step 2. Check routing table. The router consults its routing table, which contains known destination networks, prefixes, associated next hop addresses, or exit interfaces, metrics that determine the best path. The router performs a longest prefix match, meaning it selects the most specific route that matches the destination IP. Step 3. Match found. At this decision point, two outcomes are possible. Heavy checkmark yes, match found. If a matching route exists, the router determines next hop or outgoing interface. The packet is prepared for forwarding. The router may also lab, CONFIGURNG static ROUTES and SUBNETTING exercises. Decrement the TTL, time to live. Recalculate the header checksum. Heavy multiplication x no match found. If no route matches the destination, the packet is dropped. Optionally, the router may send an ICMP destination, unreachable message back to the source. This prevents packets from circulating endlessly in the network. Step 4. Forward to next hop. If a valid route is found, the router encapsulates the packet into a new Layer 2 frame, assigns new MAC addresses, next hop Forwards the packet through the appropriate interface. Right arrow the packet now continues its journey toward the destination network. Step 5. Packet leaves interface. The packet exits the router and is transmitted to the next device, another router, or the final destination network. This entire process repeats at every routing hop until the packet reaches its destination. Security perspective, control and filtering points. This forwarding process is major point of control in network. Security, routers and firewalls can enforce policies during this decision flow. ACLs, access control lists, can block or permit traffic. Route filtering can prevent unauthorized paths. Black hole routes can intentionally direct malicious traffic. Rate limiting can mitigate certain attack patterns. If properly configured, the router becomes more than a forwarding device. It becomes a security enforcement point. Key takeaway: routing is a decision-making process, repeated millions of times per second. For each packet, the router asks a simple question. Right arrow, do I know where this packet should go? If the answer is yes, the packet moves forward. If not, it is dropped. Mastering this process allows security professionals to lab, CONFIGURNG static ROUTES and SUBNETTING exercises. Understand traffic flow, detect anomalies, and enforce precise control over how data moves through the network. Calculating subnet boundaries for security zones. Subnetting is the logical segmentation of a large network into smaller, isolated units. For security professionals, this is the primary mechanism for implementing network segmentation by limiting the scope of broadcast domains and restricting communication between subnets via firewall rules. You minimize the blast radius of a security breach. Consider a Class C network 192.168.10.24 if you need to. Isolate human resources from engineering. HR subnet 192.168.10.26 hosts 162. Engineering subnet 192.168.164.26 hosts 65.126. The subnet mask 255.255.255.192.26 creates these boundaries. In a configuration file, the static route to reach the engineering subnet from the HR gateway would look like this. Bash hash syntax example Cisco IOS hash IP route. Destination network subnet mask next hop IP route 192.168.164.255.2.55255.192.10.002. Exercises. Complete the following tasks to verify your understanding of routing and address allocation. 1. Static route implementation. You have a web server at 172.16.10.5 connected to router A. You want all traffic for the 10.20.30.0.24 network to pass through router B at 172.16.10.1. Write the static route command for router A. 2. Subnet calculation. You are assigned the 192.168.50.0.24 block. Calculate the CIDR notation and subnet mask needed to create 4 subnets that can each hold at least 50 hosts. 3. Gateway auditing. You find a routing table entry 0000000000192.168.11. Explain what this entry represents and why it is the most critical route to monitor for potential traffic hijacking. 4. Boundary verification. Using a tool like IPCalc or binary math, confirm if 192.168.1129 falls within the 192.168.1128.26 subnet. Summary. Static routing provides the predictability required for secure network design, while subnetting ensures that segments Remain logically isolated by manually defining your paths. You remove the reliance on automated protocols that could be manipulated. In the next section, we transition to how these networks automatically discover neighbors and resolve addresses, II, transport layer security, and session management. Analyzing TCP three-way handshake and connection states. The TCP three-way handshake is the foundational mechanism for connection-oriented communication. It ensures that both the client and the server are ready to exchange data, verifying that both sides are reachable and capable of sequencing packets correctly. This process will listen the synchronization of sequence SEQ and acknowledgement ACK numbers, which prevent data loss and allow for the reassembly of out-of-order packets. The handshake sequence. The process follows a strict three-step exchange to establish session 1. SYN synchronize. The client sends a packet with the SYN flag set and a randomly generated initial sequence number ISN. This signals the start of the session and tells the server the client is ready to communicate. 2. SYN ACK synchronize acknowledgement. The server receives the client's SYN, acknowledges it by setting the ACK flag and adding 1 to the client's ISN. Simultaneously, it sends its own SYN flag with a unique, randomly generated server ISN. 3. ACK acknowledgement. The client receives the server SYN ACK and sends a final ACK packet. This includes the server's sequence number incremented by 1, confirming to the server that the connection is fully established. SYN sec equals X, SYN ACK sec equals Y, ACK equals X plus 1, ACK sec equals X plus 1, ACK equals Y plus 1, client server. Understanding connection states. TCP is a stateful protocol. Each end of the connection tracks its status in a finite state machine. For a security professional, observing these states is the primary way to detect scanning, half-open connections, or potential denial of service (DoS) attempts. Analyzing TCP three-way handshake and connection states. TCP connection states and lifecycle management. The Transmission Control Protocol (TCP) is a connection-oriented protocol designed to ensure reliable, ordered, and error-checked delivery of data between hosts. To achieve this, TCP uses a well-defined set of connection states that govern how a session is established, maintained, and terminated. Understanding these states is critical for analyzing network behavior, troubleshooting connectivity issues, and identifying potential security threats such as scanning or denial of service attacks. Listen, waiting for connection requests. The listen state is typically associated with a server. In this state, the server is actively waiting for incoming connection requests. A specific port is open and ready to accept connections. No active session exists yet. This is a passive state, but it is also a potential exposure point. Open listening ports can be discovered through port scanning, making proper access control essential. SYN sent, connection initiation by client. In the SYN sent state, the client sends a SYN synchronize packet to initiate a connection. It is now waiting for a response from the server, SYN ACK. This marks the first step of the TCP three-way handshake. If no response is received, the client may retransmit or eventually time out. SYN received, server acknowledges request. When the server receives the SYN packet, it responds with a SYN ACK, synchronize acknowledge. The connection enters the SYN received state. The server is now waiting for the client's final acknowledgement, ACK. At this stage, the connection is half open, which makes it a target for SYN flood attacks, where attackers attempt to exhaust server resources by never completing the handshake. OSI and TCP, three-way handshake and connection states. Established active data transfer. Once the client sends the final ACK, the connection enters the established state. Full duplex communication begins. Data can now flow reliably between client and server. This is the primary operational state where applications exchange data. Most network monitoring and security analysis focus heavily on traffic in this phase. FinWait 1/FinWait 2, connection termination. Initiated when one side